Thanks for coming back for part 2 of this episode on the Real Rescue Podcast, powered by Vertical Helicast. This episode is going to be brought to us by Bell, a history of innovation that goes above and beyond flight. Check them out today at bellflight.com. And Precision Aviation Group. It takes more than just parts to get off the ground. Their precision is the key to your performance. Check them out today at precisionaviationgroup.com. Now, we get to finish off our episode with Mr. Wryan Webb. My name is Jason Quinn. I am United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer number 500. These are my rescues and rescues from those of us that put our lives on the line every day so others may live. This is the Real Rescue Podcast. So now let's bring you up. So actually, this is kind of funny. So you go up to Michigan, right? And Traverse
City. Yep.
While you're up there, so you leave in April to go up there, and a couple months later, you get deployed to Houston.
Yeah. So Houston at the time had just gotten hit with a pretty big storm, and then it got hit, and then it got hit again. That was Hurricane Harvey. They had basically come ashore and then went offshore and come ashore, and so they were, well, probably everyone's pretty familiar. Harvey, they just kind of sent a lot of people at it.
So I got a question before I read your air medal. Well done, sir. But did you fly down the helicopter from Traverse to get down on scene?
I did not. We took a ride on a C-27 out of Milwaukee. So it's pretty cool. They flew forms 260s from Traverse City to Milwaukee, bringing over our whole crew. I think it was an extra maintainer, and then a bunch of gear and all of our suitcases and stuff. Dropped us off at the airport, and then those guys flew back. One of them had to PL, and then we jumped on a C-27 with a crew from a Great Lakes Aton boat that had brought the banana boats and some other stuff. And the C-27 flew us all down to Houston.
Wow. Yeah. Man, that's cool. Well, here is your write-up for that one. Citation to accompany the award of the Air Medal to Lieutenant Wryan C. Webb, United States Coast Guard. Lieutenant Webb is cited for heroic achievement in aerial flight on 30 August 2017 while serving as aircraft commander aboard Coast Guard Helicopter 6009 in response to the devastation caused by Hurricane Harvey. The Category 4 hurricane made landfall on 3 separate occasions and released more precipitation than any other tropical cyclone in U.S. history. Lieutenant Webb was charged with performing rescue operations in the vicinity of Beaumont, Texas, where countless citizens were trapped by rapidly rising floodwaters. Despite the torrential rain, low ceilings, and reduced visibility, Lieutenant Webb and his crew launched from Air Station Houston into the highly congested and unfamiliar airspace replete with hazards including power lines, antennas, and numerous other rescue helicopters. Demonstrating superior airmanship, he maneuvered the helicopter with exceptional precision to hoist survivors from multiple confined areas as turbulence and gusting winds caused the wild and unpredicted power and attitude fluctuations. Exhibiting outstanding skill and determination, Lieutenant Webb performed 40 extremely demanding hoists from altitudes approaching 200 feet. Lieutenant Webb's actions and aeronautical skill were instrumental in the rescue of 29 survivors and 6 dogs. His courage, judgment, and devotion to duty are most heartily commended in keeping with the highest traditions of the United States Coast Guard. Damn, Ryan. 26 people, 6 dogs. You know how happy my wife is right now with 6 dogs? Oh.
Well, the first thing I'd say is, pretty much everyone got an air medal down there, and the write-up is very similar for most people. And that's just a testament to a lot of people putting in a lot of hard work. So no, I appreciate that. The second thing I'll say is I made a lot of mistakes down there. And it's an important thing to keep in mind, is that none of us are none of us are flawless. Like we all are learning all the time, and we should be. But that particular set of rescues was my first rescues as an aircraft commander, right? So I had made aircraft commander in Elizabeth City. Shortly thereafter, this whole like short tour thing just kind of like happened in a crazy whirlwind of the span of one day, and then ended up in Traverse City. Flew a bunch of SAR in Traverse City, but it was all searches or uncores or that kind of stuff. Never actually had a rescue until Harvey, and so then flying in Harvey was kind of the first time there. And yeah, we did some stuff right. We did some stuff that were lessons that I'll remember forever, and it was a good time. So
all right, so
yeah,
let me dive in a little deep. Actually, before I go there, I'm gonna take your comment and because you said that a lot of people got air medals down there, and rightfully so. I believe Katrina the same thing. Like, but something that I haven't done right here, and I'm gonna do it at this moment, is the criteria for earning an air medal. All right, so here's what it says: the air medal may be awarded to individuals who, while serving in any capacity with the armed forces, quote unquote, distinguish themselves by heroism, outstanding achievement, or by meritorious service while participating in aerial flight. That is exactly what you did, you and everybody else. So have no illusions that, okay, everybody got an air medal. Yeah, that's because everybody was doing some outstanding shit down there. It was crazy. So, and I'll say that for Katrina as well. It was insane. Like the whole, I mean, your hurricane winds, the torrential downpour, people stuck on roofs. It's crazy, and I was not part of
yeah,
either one of them.
yeah.
So,
And I'm not. I say that not to discredit that at all, because I do think that there is amongst some people there's like a it's, you got your, what were they calling it? They were calling it like a KFC for a while, the Katrina like flying something or another. But I, unless you were there and actually trying to navigate that stuff, you don't really understand. And I do think that there is some really awesome work done by everyone down there. I guess what I was trying to say is like that's by no means a reflection of like I was standing out as someone who is exceptional amongst that group. Like the whole group down there did really exceptional work. And when I think
which I
back about
appreciate.
how many like hazards and unknowns there were that everyone was facing all at the same time, and the fact that we didn't, that we all did a good job, it just makes me really happy, that it
Yeah.
went like it did. So
Well,
yeah,
like I said, I appreciate that. I really do. And I love you're being very humble about it, which we don't do this for the awards. You said it earlier. It's not why we do this. We do it because we love what we do. The awards are just kind of a bonus, but to highlight if everybody's going down there and everybody's earning something to that level, that means the flying and what you guys are being called out to is ridiculous. So now it's going to bring me to my next question. You said you did some things right and you did some things wrong. Lessons you will never forget and can pass on. What might those be?
oh man, so many. Um, at one point we had picked up a bunch of people in the helicopter, and where we had put our rescue swimmers down is Luke Headley and Wes Price, if you know those guys. But we'd put them down into this neighborhood because we'd gotten a report that someone in one of those houses had a stroke. We didn't have a good idea where. It was before it kind of became, well, we had downloaded an address, but the address wasn't great. So as soon as they got into the water there in the neighborhood, because the neighborhood was underwater, people just kind of started coming out of the woodworks. It became a mob very quickly, not like an angry mob, but just like a lot of people like help me type situation. So we ended up, packing the back of the helicopter with people, and I was like, well, now what do we do? Where do we take these people? Like, there's water everywhere. And John Arden, my co-pilot at the time, was like, hey, the 65s have found this gas station, which had just enough elevation in the neighborhood that it was kind of like an island, and they're dropping people off there. Like, okay. So we go over there and we start dropping people, or we're trying to hoist them down in a basket. But then it's like, well, now we're like blowing around, the cover that's over the pumps. We're blowing that thing around a lot. We're just blasting all the survivors that are down there. So as we're hoisting a survivor down, survivor number 1, Nick Becker's in the back, hoisting that person down and also conning us up at the same time. And before you know it, he's like, I think I'm about to run out of cable. And I look down, I'm like, oh, dang, like we're at 200 feet and we're still blasting these people. Like, this is not good. So we end up getting that survivor down out of the basket. It's like, let's find a different spot. So we go kind of to the other side of the gas station. Like, okay, there's water there, but this ought to work. So we send survivor number 2 down, and then everyone starts kind of running out to help them because essentially we're lowering someone in a basket into the water, and it didn't look like it was deep water, but as they're coming out there, we noticed it was like waist deep water, and that's not good either. So I felt really uncomfortable with both of those situations, and ultimately we decided to abort sending anyone else down, and we flew up the road a little ways until we found like where the road kind of came up out of the water, and there was a bunch of ambulances and stuff just kind of there on the road next to an overpass. And we ended up landing there and kicking everyone else out. And then we came back, we picked up a bunch of people, and we took them back to that spot. So lesson number 1 there is, just because you have a whole bunch of people in the back and you feel a lot of time pressure to get back and hoist a bunch of other people, don't put your survivors in a just as bad, if not worse, situation just to go get other survivors out of a bad situation. Like such an elementary concept, but in, kind of like the fog of SAR in the moment, it's like, yeah, that seemed like the reasonable thing to do because the 65s had just done it. And then yet it was not the right thing for us to do. We make different environmental situations underneath our helicopter. We just we're the same in many ways and we're different in many ways, and that was not the right call for us. And unfortunately, I kind of rushed us into that decision. So good learning point there. Yeah, just small things. Like we ended up turning in a helicopter once because we couldn't get the ECS, the environmental control system, like the air conditioning, to turn on.
Yeah.
And it was, super hot out and stuff. It's like, well, we're definitely going to need some ECS because otherwise we're going to burn up. And we turned it in to maintenance. And come to find out, it was because a couple switches were in the wrong position. And I'm like, yep, not going to live that one down. Yeah, just...
there's a flip side to that, though. You know how easy that is for maintenance? They're like, oh, done, next.
Yeah. It was not without some wasted effort, I think, which was even more frustrating because, there were a lot of 60s there, and all but like 2 or 3 of them that day were broken. So I was just really adding to their stress and their workload. It's dumb. Yeah, there's our last day flying there. It just really congested, getting in and out of that airport that everyone was flying supplies into. Made a bunch of mistakes there, that they're kind of hard to walk through and describe, without really being there. But so yeah, I made a lot of mistakes. I think that's a hallmark of any new aircraft commander, and really it's probably a hallmark of everyone, if we're being honest. Like, you have to recognize that you're going to make mistakes all the time. It's just a fact of life.
Yeah.
But some of them certainly are, stick out to you a little bit more than others. So learned a lot, for sure. For sure.
Okay. So now, what did you do right?
I think we did a lot of things right. We pushed when it was appropriate to push. We worked really well together. Winding our way from Houston to Beaumont is really where most of our work was done. So, the majority of the storm crushed Houston in the first few days. And then we didn't realize it at the time, but Beaumont, I think it's Beaumont, it's right next to Houston. The storm had kind of headed over that direction and had deluged that area. So the day that we launched and did all those hoists, the majority of the 60 and 65 fleet was going to Houston. Everyone was sent into Houston, like, go look for more survivors and stuff. There was like 2 or 3 of us that got sent to Beaumont. Like, hey, stroke victim, this address, Beaumont, it's this ways, a long ways. Someone else was going to do a different, I think it was Trip Hayes and Rap, I think, were maybe going to go do a pregnant lady or something like that, also in Beaumont. But there were no reports at the time that Beaumont had been totally flooded out. So we got there and we started looking for a stroke person. I was like, God, grief, like this whole neighborhood's underwater. And then once, we're kind of calling stuff in, and a couple of the other crews are calling stuff in, by the afternoon, Beaumont had turned into just a flying frenzy that was just crazy. But long story short,
Wow.
Getting from Houston to Beaumont, you have to traverse the ways, and you're flying, you pass a number of different refineries, there's towers, there's power lines, there's all sorts of stuff. And it was really windy and driving rain. And so I think the risk management piece there, we did pretty well, getting from A to B in a place that we'd never flown. And then just working through those problems together as a crew. High hoists. It wasn't super windy, sustained. I think it was like 35 knots sustained is what I remember from my write-up that my notes. But those 35 knots would be punctuated by extremely gusty conditions. So you'd be sitting there, 35 knots, okay, we can deal with this. Or sitting in a hover, and then you just watch a tree, basically the whole thing just blow over and then come back up. And you're like, this is going to suck. And then boom, the helicopter gets hit. There were a couple times I remember distinctly, we're sitting there like 100-something foot hover trying to get someone in a basket. And then you get slammed with this gust and the helicopter starts kind of weather vaning and stuff. And the left pedal hits the stop, like that's all we got sort of thing. And then we keep turning a little bit and then eventually we come back in. It's like, if that's happening on 60, that's ridiculous,
Yeah.
So just kind of working through all that together as a crew. And, we practice offsite landings in the Coast Guard in most of, at most air stations to specific training sites. But you never practice going and landing on a highway between a couple different concrete barriers surrounded by ambulances, so that was totally new for everyone. And it's something that I feel very confident in doing right now. But at the time I was like, what are we doing? Just an extreme learning point. But we just worked together really well. When we stopped for fuel the first time, the transmission oil filter bypass button had popped. Our flight mech, Nick Becker, found that. And so we were grounded. We ended up having to do the maintenance there on deck as like the helicopters were landing right next to us, just blowing us all around. And so they flew out the parts. He did the maintenance. Myself and Luke helped him out how we could, did the QA, and then we kept flying. And then towards the end of the day, it became really challenging navigating with all those aircraft. You had all the Air Force jolly guys out there thinking it was like Vietnam, just like braking right in front of you and doing crazy stuff. You had like a ton, like all the Coast Guard helicopters had shown up at that point. And so like trying to navigate all that was also challenging. So I think we did a really good job of helping as many people as we could in a short amount of time, while at the same time just managing the various different risks that kind of change throughout the day. And that's what I'm probably most happy about. It's just we did the safest that we could given the conditions, and still were able to help a lot of people. We hosted a mom with like a newborn. We'd hosted a couple special needs folks, some kids, some elderly, obviously dogs. So yeah, I felt pretty good about it by the end of it. We helped a lot of people that day.
Fantastic. Excellent. I'm going to throw a couple things out there. You mentioned a couple things that I like. I like the fact we get an opportunity to really talk about this. So I am not a pilot. I had no qualm in throwing that out. I am not a pilot. However, I have been in enough aircrafts and enough helicopters that I know a little bit. And what you mentioned there was at one point you get that gust of wind and your left pedal, you hit the stop. So on the pedals up front, and you correct me anytime you want and interject anytime you want, but when you hit that stop, that means there's no more left pedal. That means that the aircraft can no longer keep the tail going towards the right. or going to the left.
Left. Yeah.
Yeah.
Left.
So now
Well,
you
the tail
don't
would
have
go
any
right, the
more.
nose would go left. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So now you don't have any more of that. That means no matter what, the tail's going to move in the direction that you're trying not to move. So it's important to say that, because that's how bad things can get worse if you don't have that. And actually, I almost had that like literally a couple days ago on the mountain coming out, and it was like almost at the stop, and it was like, oh, we're in a turn. No, we got to bail out of here. Like that's an important that you, as a pilot, I imagine, again, not a pilot, that's something that you come back to and be like, ooh, yeah, we got to be careful of this one. And then there's a little brief in the helicopter about what to expect. Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely. And where we were at, we were in kind of a vulnerable state there when both of those things happened. The first time we had the basket was out, it was down on the deck. We had trees fore and aft, and then behind us we had power lines, and we knew that there was already, in the days leading up to that, there was a crew that had gotten blown off position in a hover, and their hoist cable had touched a power line.
Oh yeah.
And parted. Yeah, I'm sure you remember that.
Graham McGinnis was the swimmer on that. He told me all about it. Legit watched it happen.
Oh. That is insanity, and obviously very lucky that the survivor was fine. But that was also in the forefront of my mind, and so when you're in that position, like you can't just fly away. Obviously you have a basket 100 feet below you that you're going to start ripping through trees and stuff. I mean, there's no way you're going to get up in time. So that was a really uncomfortable moment. I'd never run out of left pedal before, and thankfully it's very transient. It happened. The whole aircraft is buffeting, and nose starts going more pedal, more pedal, more pedal. Pedal's not going anymore, and it just for another second or so kept going, and then came right back. And that made me start. At the time, I was taking the aircraft a little bit out of the wind line just to give myself better references. And I was like, all right, I need to be more serious about the wind here. And so I thought I had some good controls in place. And then a little bit later, another gust came through. Kind of the same thing happened, but not as bad. And I was like, okay, well, we're doing the best we can here. Like, what else can we do? And so we talked about it a little bit and made some changes. And if I remember correctly on that one, ultimately we decided not to take as many people, so we weren't loading the aircraft as much, which required less power, which requires less anti-torque. So we kind of knocked it off a little bit earlier in the survivor hoisting realm and dropped them off before we got closer on those power margins. So
very cool. Very cool. Smart.
Yeah.
Look at you being all a smart pilot and stuff. Sorry.
Making it up as we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure felt like it.
That sounds more like it. Yeah. Hey, is this working? Yes. Continue. All right, check.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. All right, man. Oh, well, I'll tell you what. Let's bring it back up to Traverse City. So, anything that stands out to you there? We're going to divert real quick to thank our sponsors.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical Helicasts and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
The SAR in Traverse City can be a little disheartening. The Great Lakes are so cold, and they remain so the whole year, and so what you have there in the Great Lakes are an abundance of Good Samaritans and small boat stations that can get on scene way faster than we're going to get on scene for pretty much anywhere other than the Grand Traverse region or Detroit, if you're at Air Station Detroit. You couple that with a ton of people vacationing on a lake that aren't familiar with the water, and you get a lot of stuff like pool toys getting blown off into the lake, which lead to SAR cases.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even think of that.
Or people that are totally unfamiliar with the dangers of cold water, and they get themselves in a situation where they perish extremely fast.
Wow.
And all of that combined kind of turns into somewhat of a depressing SAR outlook for an air station that really just wants to lean in and help people. So yeah, we flew in the summertime. It's so busy flying on. We flew on a Unicorn that got unicorn pool toy that got blown off, pool noodles, all kinds of craziness. But we also flew on a number of cases where people were legit in trouble, and they would either get rescued first or they didn't make it. And those were tough. It was really eye-opening, and this is probably going to get depressing here for a quick second, but it's important to realize for anyone listening, like, cold water is no joke, and the gas reflex and all that stuff is extremely serious. And my first flight in Michigan, we're calling it the Michigan 500, where you do the whole Lake Michigan, do a loop of it to look at all the AOR stuff. And we were down by Gary, which is really close to Chicago as the crow flies, and we heard reports of a kid that had jumped off of a dock into the water and didn't come back up. And
oh man,
it was right after I got there, so that was like late April or early May, I think. And so we just said, like, we're going. We diverted right there. We were there less than 10 minutes later, and as we're doing search patterns along the beach, half an hour later, we watched them bring the body up. And it's just, and I tell that story not to bring everyone down, but, like, seriously, cold water is no joke. And I flew on many cases like that while I was there, where people just totally misjudged what that does to the body. And so as rescue professionals that may have some kind of tie to that, I think it is partly our responsibility to help educate, just as much as it is to respond. And so, if you can take a few minutes to just impart any of that wisdom to people, and it makes the difference even in one person's life, like, it is absolutely your moral responsibility to do that. So there's that side of it. On the flip side of it, the flying there was beautiful. It's just a really, really beautiful place. Traverse City itself is extremely supportive of the Coast Guard. They're a Coast Guard city. Everyone there loves Coast Guard. It's like the Coast Guard retirement club there. Like, everyone that has been there retires there, kind of thing. And though we didn't get a whole lot of SAR experience in the traditional sense, we did get a lot of bad weather flying experience. Flew in snow and icing conditions all the time in the wintertime. Got really good at snow landings, the various different ways that you can safely get into a snow-covered field or LZ, high hovers, low hovers, no hovers, NVGs, daytime, all that kind of stuff. So, I took a lot of lessons that I learned in Michigan over the course of the 4 years there, and have been able to apply them in Alaska, which has been awesome. And then as kind of like the one guy that was in a weird place between, we had a bunch of senior people that came as the transition. We had a bunch of nuggets, and then we had me, who is like a nugget plus, who was a brand new AC. I was able to do a lot of teaching, which is kind of like a weird thing to consider when you've only been flying for a couple of years, like 3 years. But, like, all these other guys in Elizabeth City taught me this, and this. Like, at least I can do is kind of pass that on. So had a lot of great time there, flying with people that have become really close friends of mine, and showing them the few tricks that I had that were passed on to me a couple years before that. So it was a great time. I met my wife there. We had a blast. Highly recommend that tour to anyone considering it. And you have all 4 seasons there, which I never had going.
Oh yeah,
it was awesome.
Oh yeah, Texas, you guys don't get 4 seasons. You have like 1.5.
We have hot. Yeah, we have hot, and then we have like a week of rain, and then we have hot again. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So now, Ryan, you leave there, and actually, I'm going to throw this out there. You earned another achievement medal going out of there for your tour and everything. Mad props again. I won't get into that one because, again, it's that end. But now you're up in Sitka, Alaska, and you've been there how long?
About 2.5 years. We're supposed to leave this summer, which it's going to be tough. Yeah, 2.5 years.
Extensions, they happen.
Yeah, we considered it. We really did consider it. At this point, we're not asking for an extension, but I could totally see us trying to come back to Alaska after we do whatever we do next. I think it's good to get a break sometimes. So
yep.
we're going to go do something else for a little bit and then probably come back to Sitka or Kodiak if we can, if they'll have us.
Great. Well, is there anything that stands out to you in Sitka that you've done? We're going to divert real quick to thank our sponsors.
Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory, globally 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Honestly, like every flight in Alaska is so challenging at times. Like it is by far the most challenging, but also the most rewarding flying ever. There's nothing that compares to it. And it's not that like, I think sometimes Alaska pilots within the Coast Guard get this rap of like they think they're better than everyone, and that's not at all the case. It's just that, any Coast Guard air station can face really significant hazards, right? You think about Elizabeth City, like long range, fuel considerations, sometimes bad weather. Traverse City, also the potential for long range, though you had fuel everywhere, but you still kind of had to manage that piece sometimes. But significant bad weather in the wintertime. Haven't really had to deal with terrain before Sitka, but now I'm in a place where terrain is absolutely a factor on every single flight I fly on. Bad weather is the norm, not the exception. Everything is long range. There's hardly any fuel anywhere. And so it's the consistency of those hazards. It's like, every once in a while you get a nice clear day where you can go direct somewhere, or you can go, play in the mountains and do a bunch of rich top landings and approaches and stuff, which are awesome. But by far, the rule is bad weather, taking the long way around to get to everywhere, trying to find shortcuts where you can, and just like a truly a maximum effort to do these things. Now in Sitka, if you're not familiar, the majority of our cases come from non-maritime medevacs, which is where you have a village that's, for all intents and purposes, isolated. Maybe you're taking someone from land, but they're in a village of a couple hundred people on an island that has no road system, and you're trying to get them to a higher level of care, which is either Juneau, Sitka, or Ketchikan most frequently. And if they need a trauma center, none of those places have trauma centers, so then you're doing like a wing-to-wing into a jet to take them to Seattle or Anchorage. So that's the majority of the cases we do, but we also do some really fun, traditional maritime cases as well. The cruise season has totally accelerated exponentially over the last few years, so we're starting to see a lot more cruise ship stuff. And this past year, more SAR cases than any year that I could find on record, save 1994, and that was like a green logbook that seemed like it was just someone writing down every case they heard on the radio, but technically they had like 1 or 2 more cases that year. If they launched on all those, I don't even know if they did. But certainly, with that exception, by far the most SAR cases we ever had, definitely the most medevacs we've ever had, most lives saved. That was this past year, fiscal year 23. The year before that was the same thing, but we broke it in 23. It's just been an upward trajectory for a while. One of the cool metrics that ops and the Avantage people ran was the lives saved per flight hour, which is kind of an interesting one, but it kind of really just speaks to the value that a unit is providing to an area, and it was by far the most lives saved per flight hour of any Coast Guard unit. So just a really cool unit to be a part of, just doing some awesome stuff. But, almost every one of those lives saved, and I think we ended up with 140 or something as a unit over the fiscal year, but every one of those,
my gosh,
almost was like, like a long transit flying through valleys and fjords and stuff in bad weather to go pick someone up, and then reversing that route through a bunch of different stuff to take them to Sitka, Juneau, or Ketchikan, pretty wild. There's a couple that stick out to me on that, and again, if I'm getting too long-winded here, just tell me to stop.
You are not. No. I love it. Me too. Let it go. Let it ride. Details. I love the details.
We did. So I'll talk about non-maritimes because it's a mission that we do. We do more medevacs, and I haven't actually ran the data myself on this. I've just heard this data, but what I've heard from, I think it was district personnel, is that Sitka does more medevacs as an air station than the rest of the Coast Guard does combined. We just do it all the time. And
holy smoke!
And so, it's a mission that some people become jaded towards over time, and I can see how that could be the case. But it's so much of what we do that I really think we should take pride in it. So I'll kind of talk about those. There was one. We'll talk about two. The first one happened within my first year. I was flying with ops, the operations officer, Ryan Simke, Commander Simke, who's now going to be, sounds like he's going to be staying at the air station for a few more years in the command
good for him
position, which is awesome. But anyway, so we're flying down to Klawock, and not great weather. And once we start getting close to Klawock, we elect to go to Craig, which is right next to it, because they have a helipad that's right on the water. The reason we did that is because we could see that whole back area of the bay was just a ton of fog down there. We could see the tops of the mountains, but then everything just kind of turned into a glowing fog down beneath. And so most of these villages we go to, we have a low visibility route that takes us into where we can program in what we call a manual approach to a controlled hover. And that's, for those not familiar, is basically we build within our aircraft's computer an instrument approach into an instrument hover over the water. And that's for when you can't maintain visual on that approach. So we did that. We shot our match into the fog at night on night vision goggles. And I truly do think that's like one of the most demanding things we do as an organization. Nighttime approaches to the water, instrument approaches to the water, either doing it manually like we do for most of these, or even the automated way where both pilots are kind of backing up the flight computer. It's just so easy if you mess that up to get disoriented or have to fly away. And if you're doing it into a kind of a confined area like Klawock, then your flyaway needs to be pretty spot on, so you don't fly into something. But anyway, so we do that. We're now in I think a 50 or 80 foot hover, and we can't really see anything except the water right beneath us. So then we start creeping in. We find the helipad, we land. And we were medevacing. There was a young lady that had given birth super prematurely to a baby. And, best that the medical team, the flight surgeon and all that could tell was the mom was not really at risk. She did well with the pregnancy. But it was the fact that the baby was so premature that they wanted to get him out to Sitka. So, max effort, get down there, pick up the mom and the baby, and a clinician came from the clinic as well, which is great. And we flew him to Sitka. And I bring this one up because it's a perfect example of you don't really know. You don't really know the whole picture. And as we were doing kind of follow-up paperwork on those patients, and I'm not breaking any HIPAA stuff here, I don't even know who they are, but what I found out was that everyone made it, and the baby made it. The mom would not have made it had she stayed in the clinic, because at some point in the night she had extreme complications. I think it was like she started hemorrhaging or something that required immediate surgical intervention, something that the clinic would not have been able to do, and she would have likely not made it. So again, I bring that up just to say, like, it is a righteous mission, and sometimes it may seem like you're doing a case where the person may seem fine, but none of us are doctors. Oftentimes we're working on scarce details at best. The clinic oftentimes can't even truly assess what's going on with them. And so our job as operators is to ask the questions that need to be asked, but then to really evaluate from a risk management side, can we do this or not? And leave it to the medical professionals to determine whether or not this needs to happen from a medical side, So that was a cool one. That was one that you just feel good about afterwards, because like no one obviously wants to see that happen to anyone, let alone a brand new mom, like.
Oh yeah.
I did another one as another non-maritime medevac, and this one was I bring this one up just because it kind of talks a little bit to the challenges. We're doing a medevac out of Hoonah. Hoonah is north of the air station. If you fly there directly, it's like a half-hour flight. But when the weather's bad, you can't just pop up to 5,000-6,000 feet over the mountains and drop in to get a patient. You have to take the long way. So we fly, 15 minutes to get out of Sitka Sound, fly up the coast of, Chichikov, up into Cross Sound, through Cross Sound into Icy Strait, and then work your way into the cove that leads to the bay where Hoonah is. And then if you have to shoot a match, then you're shooting a match basically into a keyhole. And then from there, you have to visually transit through some tidal areas, which are lined with trees, to then find the runway to land and pick up a patient. So that's what we had to do. It was snowing, raining, snowing, like mixed precip. Really just can't see anything type of night. Middle of the night, flying up there. As we're coming up through Cross Sound, then we get spread incomplete master warning, master caution there, which is basically when these helicopters are Navy helicopters, they used to be able to fold the tail in on the carrier and stuff. And so there was a sensor in there that if everything wasn't locked together correctly, it would say spread incomplete, which means the tail wasn't correctly attached to the helicopter. Not great, obviously.
Not good. Yeah, not good.
Yeah, not good.
The helicopter the way the tail attached. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, we do need that. So the way that the Coast Guard helicopters are right now, like it's almost impossible for that thing to come apart. But the way that sensor is routed through stuff, it's not uncommon, unfortunately, that you'll get that master caution when you're flying through heavy precipitation if there's like some erosion stuff there with some of those wires. And unfortunately, the way that typically ends up manifesting in the aircraft is you get master caution, you acknowledge it, and then it's there. It's like, all right, it's not a big deal, but it's startling every time you get a master caution, right? It goes away after like 2 seconons, and then it comes right
bells
back.
And whistles. Yeah. Bells and whistles go on. So again, I'm not a pilot, but I've been plugged into the front. It's like a rant or a ding ding or whatever it is. What is it? What does it sound like? Guy, you know better than I do.
With this one, we don't actually get an audible tone. It's just the light. But when it's like pitch black outside and you get that light, it's still startling. It's like it just illuminates the whole cabin, and you're like, okay, we're good. It's like, okay.
You don't get the warning? Warning. You don't get that?
Not for that one. Thankfully, not for that one. Thank goodness. Yeah. But so we're like silencing that repeatedly. And then we get the ice detected light, which it signifies that we're actually building ice on the aircraft, which is another master caution. So then we're like starting the clock for that, noting our torque, doing some other stuff, making sure everything's operating the way it should be. Still repeatedly silencing the master caution. It's like, good grief, like this is becoming a little distracting. And then the weather was bad enough that we knew we were going to end up shooting that instrument approach down to the water on top of all that.
Oh my god!
Just blowing snow sideways. So that was one of those cases where then we talked about it as a crew. The guy I was flying with was like, hey, this is a little distracting to me. Like, yeah, I get that. Let's talk about duties. Splitting up some duties here. Your job is to fly the aircraft and totally be glued to those instruments. Don't be distracted by the lights. If there's something that comes up that is not a spread incomplete, I'll brief you on it. But for as best as you can, stop taking your scan away from the instruments and looking at that every time it comes up. My job is to back you up, so I'll also be doing the instruments, but I'm going to be also focusing on these things and keeping this as minimal of a distraction as possible. And if we find that, once we shoot this approach at the bottom, because this is still the quickest way for us to get out of this environment we're in, as opposed to turning around and flying all the way back through it. If we find that this is just not safe for us to keep doing, then once we get on deck, we'll rebrief that, we'll make some calls, and we'll shut it down, But the best way for us to get out of this environment right now is you to focus on instruments and us to keep going. And we'll get to this match and we'll get to the airport and we'll land. And so we do all that. I get the match programmed in. And as we're flying in, thankfully, the spread incomplete just stops happening. That whole distractor went away right before we started flying the match. And then the ice detected also went out, which signified that the system had worked and it cleared the spots that it needed to, and it hadn't built back up fast enough for it to recognize it. So we ended up shooting the approach into a hover. At the bottom, he starts to get a little disoriented, so I engaged the automatic hover coupler to the aircraft, stable us up. It's a tool that we have that I think is great. Basically allows both pilots to become monitoring pilots as opposed to one flying and one monitoring. So it's almost like you're utilizing 3 people, you know. It's a great tool. So once we did that, I was like, okay, I'm going to take controls with the hover coupler engaged, and I want you to just recage. Do your best to recage. Find whatever reference point you can and recage. Having a hard time with that, but once I got the aircraft pointed towards where the cities were, you could kind of make out the edge of the first island and some glow behind that of the city. And once he was able to look at that, then he felt pretty good about it. But then now we're in the middle of this bay, which is pretty tight, but we got to get to the airport. So to do that, we have to go up around that one island we could see into a tidal flat, pass a marina on our left and trees on our right until we found an opening in trees at like the 1 to 2 o'clock. And then we follow that tidal area to the runway. Great CRM, great crew resource management. Dave Brayton was our swimmer that night. I was like, Dave, can you jump out the left window there and just keep backing us up on the left side? And, you know, we just slowly worked our way in, just kind of hover taxiing our way in. We started off real slow, you know, 4 or 5 knots. And then by the end of it, once we started getting a little bit closer to town, we could see more. Things were lit up a little bit more. And so we were able to go a little bit faster. The runway was totally covered in snow, as would be expected. So did a snow landing there, running landing, basically keeping ahead of the cloud as best we could until the last possible moment. And then we got enveloped there and then taxied in. So that was a, you know, max effort trying to get in there to get someone that the flight surgeon had said like needs to happen tonight. We talked about it as a crew, since a lot of those distractors ended up working themselves out. We stopped getting the spread incomplete, all that stuff. We felt comfortable trying to make the trip back, so then we basically reversed our way back out of there, took back off, hovered our way back out into the bay, instrument takeoff, and then flew our way back home. And that is a flight that would be absolutely just helmet on fire if I were in Michigan or Elizabeth City. It was not that when I was in, you know, with me being in Sitka, only because of a lot of training leading up to that, you know, and splitting of duties and stuff, but still very much so, like operating very near to the edge of my capabilities, you know, and the capabilities of us as a crew. Still safe, just everyone given 100%, you know, and that is not, it's not uncommon there. It's just you are faced with a combination of hazards oftentimes that is cumulative and requires 100% of everyone. And that's, you know, that's why they send aircraft commanders there. They don't send nuggets there because there's only so much extra bandwidth you're going to have as a pilot. You know, we talked about the first case I had in Elizabeth City. It was challenging. It was definitely a challenging, hard case. But the pilot was doing the mission, flying, and teaching me at the same time. And I don't know that I would have had the bandwidth on a case like that to be doing the mission, flying, and teaching a brand new co-pilot everything I needed them to do, you know. So that's one of the ways organizationally we buy down that risk, is we send qualified, experienced people there. And even so, you end up really pressing hard sometimes to save a life. So.
Yeah. Wow, Ryan. Incredible, man. Incredible. Thank you for sharing all those stories. I appreciate it for sure.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
going to
of
throw
course.
one more thing out there to you. You're actually a photographer. And I know that because your Instagram gets blown up so much with some amazing pictures. Now, are you taking those from 160 of another, or just like you jump out of a helicopter and walk up a mountain and take a picture? Or what do you do?
Yeah, well, thanks. It's a fun hobby. Um, yeah, some of those are taken from just we'll land somewhere, I'll hop out and go take a picture, snap a picture. Some of them, there's a couple more recent ones that I've posted where I actually asked to be a passenger in the back and then flew with a crew as a passenger and took pictures from inside the helicopter. And then, they landed somewhere. I jumped out. They did maybe another approach while they're doing some mountain training or whatever with me and the rescue swimmer outside, and we took some pictures and videos that way. So a little bit of both. It really just depends on what I'm doing that day. If I have the ability to get out there as a passenger, then I try to, but that's pretty rare, unfortunately. It's a fun hobby,
It's
though.
all good.
It's a great way to blow off
Yeah.
steam, tell the story. I love telling the story of the people I work with. I just think I work with some of the best people on the planet, and I just love being able to share their story.
Well, it's amazing. Again, some of the shots I've seen, I'm like, holy cow! Just the angle that you get, your blade. I'm gonna call it the blade blur, like slowing down the shutter speed just a little bit to get the movement of the rotor head. And yeah, no, it's awesome. It's totally awesome.
Oh, thank you. I've
Ryan,
taken a lot
I'll
of
tell you what,
advice
man.
from
Yeah.
David
Go ahead.
Lau. I don't know. Have you met David Lau?
I don't think so.
He's an auxiliarist, but he's done a lot of the Coast Guard shoots that you've probably seen, like the stamp that we had with the eagle and the 65 flying in front of it, or
Okay.
the Centennial shots where you had like the yellow helicopter, all that stuff was all him, and he's
do
been a
remember
huge
seeing that
mentor of
one.
mine. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Is he up in Sitka with you now?
He's not. He's actually in Singapore right now. He's like a Nikon Singapore influencer or professional or something, but he comes back and he went away with a number of different cutters last year for a few weeks at a time, and yeah, he's a good dude.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, Ryan, man, I've had you on for almost like 2 hours now. This has been an absolute pleasure for me. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll let you go for the rest of the day, because I know you're probably going to get ready to go pack and get on your flight to get back home. You got a baby to take care of. But before I let you go, advice that you would pass on. So you've been doing this for quite a while now. You're in your 3rd unit, aircraft commander, lieutenant commander. What would you pass on to all the new guys coming in?
Man, there's, like I was saying earlier, I've just learned a lot from so many people. I think the biggest thing that I would say is that this organization is about its people. Yeah, and that sounds really cliche. I'll say, I think probably most people are aware we had a mishap in Sitka a couple months ago. And the most important thing that we all know is to focus on the people, but sometimes it can be a little hard to do that. It can be really easy to get sucked into the desk work or sucked into whatever task you've been given. But at the end of the day, this thing is nothing. This whole organization is nothing without the people. And so none of that other stuff matters if you're not taking care of each other and you're not putting their needs first. So just encourage everyone to remember that and keep that in mind. And that transcends everything from whatever dumb collateral work you're doing. If there's people involved, make sure you're putting them first, all the way through flying SAR missions. Like, whatever you're doing on that SAR mission, make sure you're including everyone in the crew, because they probably have a different, possibly likely better idea than you do. They have a different way of looking at it. And the more you can work together as a team, the better you're going to be, the more successful you're going to be, the safer you're going to be. So that'd be lesson 1. And lesson 2 is just always be willing and open to learning. It can be easy to become jaded. It can be easy to get maybe not stuck in a rut, but just like to plateau a little bit. But the more you can just keep in mind that 15-year-old Ryan looking at 34-year-old Ryan, would be totally pumped to be doing this mission, you know, and like try and keep that mentality of like, this is truly a rewarding, awesome job, and like an honor to be able to serve in this capacity. And not only that, I want to learn as much about this as I can, and I want to learn from everybody. And if you get to that point where you think that like you've got it all figured out, or like you're the guy that knows it all, like that's probably the time you should get out, because that's not the person I want to fly with. I want to fly with a person that's hungry, that is still into it, and still desires to serve and do that mission. So I think those are my two big takeaways that I have right now. You ask me next week, I'll probably have something else, but
I might call you the next week. I'm just saying. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on, sharing some epic stories from what you've done in your career so far. You've been in for 15 years. Is that about right?
I graduated in 12. So like 12 years. 2012 to
12 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost 12 years.
So we might have to do another interview on your, like, when you're done, to hear about the rest of them you got between now and the end. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Hopefully the Coast Guard lets me keep doing cool stuff like this. That'd be great.
I'm hoping too. I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm on your side right now, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun spending this morning with you here from my hotel room to your hotel room, and yeah, thanks again for having me.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. I look forward to the day we get together, maybe kick back a beer and even tell more stories.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, I'd love to hear your stories.
One or two. I like yours right now, so that's all that matters.
Okay.
All right, brother. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here.
Go.
Now, it's time for me to pull chocks and take off. But before I go, I'm always looking for the memorable rescues that people have done. If you have one that you're willing to share, or know somebody who has a story, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to highlight it here at The Real Rescue. For everybody that is standing by for that SAR alarm, remember, those in distress are praying for a miracle. They are going to get you. So until next time, fly safe and swim hard. Thank you for joining me today here at the Real Rescue Podcast, powered by Vertical Helicast. We'd also like to say thank you to our sponsors for this episode.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical Helicasts and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
And
Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory, globally 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
come on, Rotor. Good boy. Good boy. That's a good boy. Yeah, nice run. Ready, go. Come on. Oh, good boy. That's a good boy.